You're listening to the Break Podcast powered by Career Cloud.
What's up, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of the Break Podcast, where we deconstruct how top performers build resilient lives and break mental barriers to do work they love. I'm your host, Michael Gardon. Disruption and change, they're all around us and happening faster and faster. I consider the ability to deal well with change to be the single most important skill for young people to learn. To dive into this topic today, I'm talking with MJ Reiners. MJ is an organizational change management consultant. She launched her company, Summerland Education, in 2011 to enable organizations to leverage internal resources and develop high-performing work teams in order to reach their business goals. She's an expert in change management and has lessons from helping organizations with thousands of employees get buy-in for change. We discuss the skills necessary to get better at change, why we resist change, and what we can do in order to get better along our own change journeys. I hope you enjoy this chat with MJ Reiners. This episode is sponsored by ZipRecruiter. If you need a change and are looking for a new job, or if you're looking to hire for your small business, please check out ZipRecruiter today. Their smart technology matches the right candidates to the right jobs and sends new opportunities right to your inbox. They make finding a job or hiring the right person easier than ever. ZipRecruiter, the smarter way to hire. Try ZipRecruiter for free today by going to ZipRecruiter.com and tell them I sent you. MJ, welcome to the break. I'm so excited to speak with you today and learn from you today.
Thanks, Mike. I'm glad to be here. Thank you.
So I want to tee up our conversation. You kind of have built a name for yourself, helping companies through large scale transformations and change. And so this episode today is all about change. And I am excited to pull lessons from you and your journey and relate that to kind of personal change. I think all of us in this audience is grappling with how we change, right? And I think a lot of people are on this default path. And unfortunately, we have change all around us. We have disruption all around us. Every time I open up my browser, I'm looking at, tech layoffs. I'm looking at Chat GPT. I'm looking at, financial change in terms of how, our interest rates are and the underpinnings of our economy and all of that. So I personally believe that one of the greatest skills that we can acquire and get better at is adapting and thriving in a more changing environment. So I want to start with this idea of disruption. And I just want to start with where you're seeing disruption and change in the marketplace with companies and clients that you serve.
It's like what you hit on earlier. It's really happening everywhere, and change is speeding up. And I fully agree with you. That's my entire mission for educating is developing your change skills so that you can get out ahead of it. And, we're seeing the disruption on our communities, our family work way, our way we manage our families, the way we manage work. In the pandemic, we saw many companies did thrive and survive, but many didn't because the pandemic completely took people by surprise. So I have two main themes in my work is to encourage people to develop their change skills because they are skills you can learn in any business, whether you are an entrepreneur starting a business, whether you're growing a business, transforming a business, whether you're, part of social change or activism. There are forces at play that you can learn, and without having to memorize a gigantic change management methodology manual, you can learn through certain energies so that you come into approaching change proactively to minimize the pain, because the pain happens when you've got no more runway, right? You're out of time, and so you think shortcuts are going to help you. But most often change does take time. And so you want to get out ahead of it as much as you can to minimize that change, that impact for yourself, for the people around you. And then secondly, coming into balance, making sure that there are mental energies, emotional energies, as well as physical energies, because most organizations that I have worked with, they come up with a plan and they focus heavily on the action energies, the project management or the change management without realizing, okay, why are we embarking on this change? why are we, or what do we look for to get out of this change? And then secondly, how do you build enthusiasm and excitement around it? Because if you don't have that, you're never going to get to, behavior change or a change compliance, if you will. And if you're looking with big organizations, you got to move your stakeholders with you, not against you. And so it all starts with, what are we trying to achieve? Why are we doing this? What's in it for me as a stakeholder? And the change leader has to be able to articulate that, and explain that. And not just what's in it for the organization, but also what's in it for the stakeholders and the employees and the team members. Because change, it's a funny thing. It can teach you what you're made of. And you may not even realize you have certain skills and talents until you go through a transformation process. And then you look back and you're like, my gosh, that was disruptive. Maybe it was painful if it wasn't managed well, but there's still upside. There's still tremendous amount of value that you learn through those experiences. So the last thing that I would say is, after you go through a change, is to reflect and think back. What did I gain from that? Because there's always something that is positive out of a transformation or a change experience.
Yeah. I mean, you talk a little bit about building the capacity to change, and I want to talk about that in a little bit, and kind of relate that, to individual change. And, but yeah, I think the truth is, change can be voluntary or involuntary.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of it from a business standpoint is involuntary. There are competitive forces, and it leads to a lot of resistance of change. I'm thinking specifically from, an employee standpoint, like, why? Yeah, I think one of the things that I read that you've said is, moving from a known to an unknown state is scary and unnerving, and many people regard change as painful.
Mm-hmm.
But that pain often comes when we resist the change. So why do we resist change?
Well, I think it's literally part of our human nature.
Mm-hmm.
It's part of how our brains are wired a little bit. And we do view change as potentially painful. We are afraid of change. But the more we practice and the more we seek support around a change effort, whether that might be an individual change, you're developing a new habit, or within an organization and you gather a certain team who can help move you forward. Taking that, step by step and understanding, you don't have to know all the time exactly the end state, but knowing that there is discovery in the journey, and that will happen. So it's about, starting and getting that forward momentum. The fear, I think, is because of the unknown, and we think we have to have that known. At least in my journeys and in working with organizations, sometimes they know what it is. They're moving to a new technology platform. But what they're going to personally gain out of that, or how it's going to work for them within their own work environment, work setting, they may not know that at all until they start practicing with it. And so practice helps us build those connections between that uncertainty to that certainty. And so what I constantly encourage groups that I work with is, we have to practice this before it's real. So before we turn on the software, or before you implement the new policy, or before perhaps you go out and start your own business, where can you start to utilize practice and gain some assurance, okay, this is how this next step looks and feels like. And so you're starting to pull in your mental energy and some of that emotional energy, and you can link that with your actions. And, you gain a little bit more confidence step by step. It's not like it flips a switch overnight that you're unconfident one day and you're confident the next. It definitely takes practice. And so I just encourage people to practice before it's real. And as you have that own self-discovery, you get that, confidence starts to build where you're able to take the next step. And I also encourage, I don't think I always say change is a team sport. You've got to find people who can support you along the way. And that may be different from experts. I had to learn this the hard way myself. I think it's really, really important to have experts learning and engaging with people who've gone ahead of you, What did they learn? And what do you want to avoid? What pitfalls do you want to avoid? But that can be very different than the people who are going to support you. People who support you are often the people who love you the most. Maybe that's your family, your friends, and they may not have any expert knowledge at all. So you need both, because your support, your friends are going to continue to challenge you to be the best that you can be. I have a dullest story. I went ziplining once in Jamaica, and I'm not a physical risk taker. And I was with some friends of mine who were on the vacation, and they had already done ziplining. They had done it many, many times. So they had zero concern about doing it. But I was really, really nervous. When we get up to the line where the guy's about to take us up in I don't know, it's not a gondola, but the lift. And he goes, "I smell fear." And all of my friends turn and they point at me, "It's her. And this guy, he's like, "Oh, is this your first time?" I was like, yeah. He goes, "Me too." So he just made me laugh. Here's a guy who's going to put me in the harness. So he made me laugh. So I think support and using people who love us, that are going to challenge us to keep going, don't give up, don't quit, are definitely required. And that may be people in your work setting or in your home setting, but just that constant, don't give up on your dream, keep going with the change vision that you have. And also seek out experts of people who've done it before and learn from them. I think that those are two really important parts of overcoming fear and minimizing that doubt that can hold us back.
Yeah, there's a lot of kind of jumping off points there in what you said there. I think support is a big one, and it's actually in my framework, my advantage mapping framework, because if you're trying to implement a personal change, it's just plain hard. And if you don't have the right people and resources to create the mental, financial, emotional runway that you need, the time that you need to figure it out and make micro adaptations, you're going to have a much harder time. So that's why support is there. But what you kind of said around resisting change and this idea of the known and the unknown is really interesting to me as well, because I think we tend to overestimate the risk in the unknown and underestimate the risk in the known. And that we see that play out companies are highly adapted to optimize things and they resist having redundancy, because that on paper, that looks like wasted resources or wasted energy. But I think that's focusing on kind of like this scaffolding of building resilience in yourself, as opposed to trying to optimize for one path, helps you. It's just fundamental to weathering change, because you are much more able to adapt and move sideways like an elite athlete could, make a football move or a basketball move, because you have this resilience. And so I preach all the time, let's focus on resilience and redundancy and the fundamentals rather than some massive optimization. Because if we're wrong a little bit on our path with optimization, we are really prone to bad consequences. So I think about that kind of mentality, and I'll let you kind of chime in there. But I'm wondering, what is your tool set like for practice, right? You were talking about practice. And so how do you practice? What are the things that we need to do to build this capacity for change?
Take me back to there, but I wanted to add just a tidbit onto the last question about resilience, because you hit on it. I think, resistance. I think we resist change because we want to be in control. And the current state, we know that's where we're certain. We know what today is going to be like. But if we have this perception of that we can control our future by not changing, but actually that's completely opposite. Change is going to happen. It's just evolution. It's just nature. It's just, the only question is, are you going to be ready or are you going to be behind? So it's a timing thing. So that's where I encourage. You're not going to be in control of the change, the best way to do it is to start to get ready, start building those skills, building that resilience, practicing, because you may not know what you're going to need. So I've had two big changes in my life, big ones. One was involuntary, and one now is voluntary. I moved from corporate to becoming a independent consultant. And that was the first change. And I did really well with that one. The second one is moving from being a consultant to an educator. And so there's all of these new skills that I'm trying to learn and build up. And for years, I resisted that because I was kind of like on top of my A game as a consultant. It's quite lucrative. I know what to do. I've been doing this for 20 years. I can help organizations. I can see, oh, this is the problem you need to focus on. We need to change this here. And it just came very, very second nature to me. It was that known state. But now I have a broader vision to help people build their change skills. And so I'm moving also, I'll always consult, but I'm moving also to helping people with developing their education or their change skills by my focus being education. So I had to learn how to be an educator, and I'm still in that process. I would say I'm in the middle of that process of learning new skills. And COVID, actually, you talked about the time and the space. COVID actually gave me space to learn new skills. I had to learn how to video. I had to learn how to edit and do different lighting. I had to learn how to be an educator. So I have a coach who is my education coach, and she talks to me about the different parts of the brain that help light up so that there's understanding, and then there's commitment, and then there's follow-up, which is exactly the philosophy or the underpinnings of my change model. Is you have to have mental energy, and you as the change leader, you have to make sure people understand. Secondly, you need emotional energy. You've got to have that heart. You've got to have excitement and enthusiasm. And if you can have camaraderie and joy in your team, you can overcome tremendous obstacles with change. And then you also, of course, need the physical. You've got to take action, and you've got to get over that resistance. You got to get over that inertia. And so when I talk about practice, it's, you got to kind of get specific. You know, what are you trying to do? And what are you trying to achieve? And I always encourage people, practice before it's real. You know, do it in, a setting with your friends, before you have to take it back to the workplace. So what I'm setting up is some, videos and some education tools, and maybe I'll follow your lead in doing some online podcasts or, like Zoom sessions where I just help people troubleshoot, and they come and we talk about the problems that they're having with their organization change, and just start to practice and work that out before they have to take it to their real world setting. So they learn in a new way that's lower risk, right? So I think it's seeking out ways to do that practice in lower risk before you have to do it in front of your CEO or in front of your VC capital, whatever that might be. So did I give a little bit of that, or you want to go deeper into?
Yeah. So I get like what you said makes sense from a standpoint of, okay, you've decided what the change is and you need to develop specific skills and practice, and all of that makes sense. Because obviously it's new to you, and you're like a child who's learning something new for the first time, and that all makes sense. So, but I'm wondering, I guess, are there specific skills that make you more able to adapt to change generally? What are the things that we can work on? And, an example from my experience is being able to sort of see how you can do micro experiment. It's like a mindset shift, that you don't need an entire long plan, but I basically call it thinking in bets. This is Annie Duke, who wrote a book called Thinking in Bets. And it's, she's a professional poker player. And it's like every decision that you're doing, you are sort of placing a bet. And just because you're wrong doesn't mean anything. That's totally fine. But it's the accumulation of signal and knowledge over many, many bets that ultimately gets you to a spot where you can bet really big because you're pretty sure. And have confidence. And so like that's one example. And I'm curious as to like, if you've seen anything from really good companies that are adept at change or individuals, and how we can sort of relate that together.
Well, I like the analogy of the bets, and the thing is, it's starts, I think, with curiosity, right?
Yeah.
And we got to be willing to challenge the status quo, and that's that certainty part. And everything's working out great, and we're loving where we're at, super. But if that's not where society's moving, or technology's moving, or economics is moving, that status quo isn't going to be there for you in 2 years or in 5 years. So it's starting to forecast. It's starting to think about what if, ask yourself those questions, right? And you may not have to solve it today, but one of the things that I encourage people when they have a dream or a future state is write it down, and start. The more you start imagining and the more you start visualizing what that could look like and shaping it in your mind, it's going to be easier to make that physical in the future. You're going to put more energy behind it from taking action and those kind of things. So the betting construct is really, really fascinating because you can test out different things. So, asking different questions and testing them out in a way that you're practicing before it's real, where you can see what's going to provide you some feedback, what's going to provide you better traction and going deeper into perhaps a product or a service. But testing and getting that feedback on multiple things and then picking from there. That's a great technique. Absolutely.
So this idea of testing, right? And bets, testing, prototypes, experiments, I'm using them all interchangeably, right? But like the proof here for anybody who's doubting some of this, there's proof all over the place. I think about 3 huge disciplines that use this concept. Obviously, gambling, right? I talked about Annie Duke, so I'm not going to include that one. But when you really think about 3 huge disciplines that do very, by nature, they do things that are uncertain. Okay. It's the world of investing. It's product design, human-centered design, coming up with new products, essentially, and entrepreneurship. And all 3 of those disciplines, well, if you break them down, at the heart of the process around this chaos is micro bets. And an investor is going to come up with a thesis about a company, and he or she is going to put a relatively small amount of money in that company. And he or she is going to continue to learn about that company. And as as the thesis unfolds and they're more confident, they're going to start to bet bigger and bigger and follow that investment. And if it's going the other way, they're going to cut their loss. And so their loss over the long run is relatively small compared to what their gain will be over the long run if they continue to apply the right framework to the whole thing. And entrepreneurs are doing this all the time, finding product market fit. It's build, measure, learn, right? Yeah. So it's the proof is all over there. And it's like, we can just take these concepts and bring them to our careers or changing a habit or whatever it is that we want to do. So that's why I kind of asked that question, is like, I want people to understand that there are tools out there and we can get better at this as a skill. 100%.
I fully agree with that. And what you're talking about, as they learn and test, what's happening is more mental energy is going into that future vision, more emotional energy, because it worked, right? We're getting reinforcement. And so that grows and grows and grows until, it becomes more competent. So we're going to take a bigger steps. So we're taking a bigger action, and until the point where, it's here, it's now, it's certain, right? So it moves from this state of unknown that's an idea through the continuum of our mind, our emotion, and then physical. But what I encourage at least organizations, and I think it's probably the same with individuals, is you can't skip that emotional step. You've got to have desire. If that desire isn't there, if that enthusiasm isn't there, you're going to kind of have holes in that future vision. But the more you want something and the faster you take action, the more you can make that real and more get to that certainty state faster.
You're listening to the Break Podcast powered by Career Cloud.
This episode is sponsored by ZipRecruiter. If you need a change and are looking for a new job, or if you're looking to hire for your small business, please check out ZipRecruiter today. Their smart technology matches the right candidates to the right jobs and sends new opportunities right to your inbox. They make finding a job or hiring the right person easier than ever. ZipRecruiter, the smarter way to hire. Try ZipRecruiter for free today by going to ZipRecruiter.com and tell them I sent you.
I really like that. I think I do believe it, confidence, belief, whatever you want to call it. There's like a flywheel effect when you take action. Yes. And one of the ways that you I think a lot of people get overloaded, right? Like, oh, this is so big. They build up some change in their mind and it's so big. But if you break that down to like this smallest component, right? And it almost sounds like, who cares if I do this little tiny thing? You start to build this belief flywheel because you're taking action and the stakes are very small.
Yes.
So the risk in your mind is very small. And so I think I view that as like the key to getting over your fear around any change is to break it down. And then guess what? You're also doing.
Yeah.
You're falling in love with the process instead of the outcome. And I think that gets to your point around emotion, like especially with a company, I would think getting emotional buy-in from the employees and from the entire organization has to be more about, guys, this is uncertain, but this process is actually going to be fun, or it's actually going to be rewarding, not we need to make $100 million more from this. Like nobody's emotionally connected to that. Yeah. But if it's something around this process and how an individual being a part of this team is going to improve, that's to me how you do it. And then you have 1,000 people that are ready to do this because they believe in the growth that they're going to see.
Right. Absolutely. And change leaders who can harness that and explain what's in it for the individual as well as what's in it for the company. A lot of times companies talk about what's good for them, but not what's in it for the individual. But there is plenty of benefit for the individuals. They're going to go deep and develop skills and perspectives and wisdom and experience that is transferable to anything, whether it's in corporate or as an entrepreneur. So all of that continues to play. But I find leaders in corporate are they hold back from kind of explaining and encouraging that, which I guess you can understand. They don't want people to leave, but still, whether they leave or not, they still are going to be able to improve their skills so they can take on bigger and bigger change challenges. And the other thing that you talked about is to break it down. One of the central tenets of change, there's an author, Everett Rogers, wrote The Diffusions of Innovation back in the 80s. And he talks about there's 5 main reasons why people will adopt a change. And one of them is simplicity. So if you got a big, massive change in your organization, like I used to do software technology implementations, and there's, those are sometimes up to 2-year projects. They're massive, 200 people, big budgets, but all you can do is, what are we going to get done today? Right. And then you have to share with those stakeholders and your team members. You've got to be able to, as a change leader, you have to see where they need to go, and you got to put a lot of energy on where we're going to navigate to, but then also what's going to get done today and holding people accountable to doing the work we need to do today, measuring that, and then continue to move forward. So it's the same thing if you had a business change at entrepreneurial level or even an individual change. You can't just say, I'm going to lose 10 pounds tomorrow. It's right. What are you going to do tomorrow, to start a daily habit. And so all of these techniques and practices apply to this and can be scaled. So break it down and make it as easy as possible, because when it's that easy step, then you've accomplished that. You've just gained what? Confidence, certainty, and then you're ready to take the next step and the next step. So what I encourage people is change does take time. Don't put the limits on yourself with that, but, focus on how you can build your desire and build your confidence, because over time you really can accomplish anything that you want to.
Yeah, I think I'm going to switch gears here in a second, but I just want to say, like, change does take time from my experience. And I've changed a lot. I think people underestimate that, right? They have an epiphany. They're like, I hate my job and oh my God, I could do something else. And so in 2 weeks, I want to have that completely, locked up. And it's like, no, it's not going to take, it's going to take a little longer than that. So that's why I'm really fascinated with these sort of resilience skills and how we prepare ahead of time and how we think about, one of the things I talk about, and I heard you say it as well, is this a concept of runway, and financially or emotionally or whatever, like how are you going to give yourself a long enough time frame to enact the change, and what are the kind of interim milestone steps that you can take? So, I think as a society, we have a lot to learn about this concept of change. And I want to go to, you touched on it a little bit before, which is sort of some of your own experience. And I want our audience to kind of get a really deep dive on some of these big changes, that you've personally gone through and what you've learned from that. So can you just start a little bit from the beginning and maybe give us a quick synopsis of your career trajectory?
Sure. Yeah.
From the beginning.
So I worked in many different corporate environments. I had worked with a couple consulting firms, one really big one was a startup. I've worked in some hospital organizations, some really long ones. And then I spent over 10 years in a software technology company. And I think I'd always, since I was a kid, I had a dream of going out and being on my own. And I think that was inspired by my dad, who he passed away 17 years ago, but he was in real estate in the state of Missouri. And he found his own little niche that nobody else in real estate was doing, where he was an appraiser on a couple different levels, and he sold farm and land. And, he had this, quality that I just grew up to admire of, be able to live his life. And he worked really, really hard, but he was able to do that on his own terms. And so he had this lifestyle of sovereignty. And I just grew up with that. And I was like, that's what I want, and I think it's what everybody wants. Right. And so I had my first transformation from the corporate world out to being an independent contractor. So I'm a solo entrepreneur. I don't have employees, but I am deeply, deeply passionate about change and helping organizations. So many of them look to, for big projects, big transformations, they look to consulting firms to come in and to do that work for them. And in many regards, that's necessary and required, right? But what I try to do is to help those organizations learn how to do it themselves. So as a consultant, I've been doing this for well over 20 years. And the one thing, Mike, that I would have never predicted this, but it has helped me so immensely, is right after I got out of college, I was a CPA, and I did really well in school. I excelled in school, and I got A's in accounting classes. So I got this great new job in an accounting firm. But when I got out in the real world, I was not a good consultant, a good accountant, and I didn't make it there very long. And so I left, and I was like, okay, that's not for me. I am not a good accountant. Well, the world needs them, absolutely, but that's not for me. So literally, then fast forward, 20 years or so later, I started my own company as I moved out of corporate to become a solopreneur. And I was shocked at how much I needed and relied on basic accounting skills. So entrepreneurs don't have to be CPAs, hands down. But I really, really think it's an important skill to take a few classes and understand cash flow. Because when you can understand cash flow, it really can control your fear and your doubt. Because that helps define your runway. And you got to find ways to continue to get cash coming in, because you're going to learn new things as you're building your new product or service, whatever that might be, as you're going out on your own. So it's going to take some time, but, so you're going to, you got to have two levers, right? Your cash and your dream. But if your dream doesn't happen because of cash, don't conflict those two things. Your dream is still viable, 100% still viable. It might just take you another year or 5 years or 10 years or whatever. Never, ever, ever give up on that. I say grit, don't quit. Never quit. But I think that it's very common. Change initiatives themselves, 70% of change initiatives fail. And then you might know the statistic better than me, but like, isn't it like 2/3 of all new businesses fail in like 5 years? Are you familiar? Something like that?
Yeah,
So
I think it's actually like closer to 80%.
is it? Okay. So it's high, right? So sometimes that failure occurs because of lack of funding, but that doesn't mean the dream was not viable. It's just, you got to find new pathways, find new avenues to get to that. So don't conflate cash with your dream. But I do think that cash management, cash flow, understanding that is really, really critical for young people. Because if you're going to lose your balance, you're going to get in a very, very fearful state if you can't pay your bills. And that's not what anybody wants, right? So it's that Maslow's hierarchy, your security level is at the bottom. You got to be able to pay your bills before you can self-actualize and be the best that you can be. So that's going to take some good chunk of your life. But always hold on to that and keep moving towards that.
Yeah, that Maslow's is a good, I think maybe visual representation of my thoughts around resilience versus optimization. Like you can't optimize for self-actualization if you don't take care of the basics, right? And so you need to like taking care of the foundational runway, right? Is a skill related to resilience. I gotta ask though, I want to bring this back to you. What made you a bad accountant? Because you obviously turned out to be a good consultant. Yeah. So I'm really curious as to what that transition was like. Well,
I mean, I'm going to say this, I don't want to offend any accountants out there because the world needs those. I just found it boring. I like the future. I'm always looking for the future and trying to forecast and how can I navigate and bring people with me. I just love reading about the future and studying, and I'm a constant and I'm a perpetual learner. So it just became much more exciting for me. So after I left accounting, I went to work for a healthcare organization, and the CIO that I was working with there, the healthcare organization was really had a great funding program for getting a master's degree. And I said, should I get a master's in like health administration or maybe like an MBA? And he goes, MJ, you're already a CPA. You don't need an MBA. That's not going to do anything for you. He goes, why don't you get a master's in information technology? And I said, what's that? So I'm giving away my age a little bit. So that's what I did, information systems to be specific. So I started taking master's courses in information systems, and I got really excited about that. And that's what leveraged a big jump in my career. Still working in corporate world during that, but I moved from being an analyst level and a director up to vice president. And then I got a great job, but it was short, as a vice president of business development. And I learned a ton there. And then I was in healthcare technology for over 10 years. So all of that was kind of fueled by, a lot of, skill development, different things at different angles, and being able to do different things. I had never made a pitch to a venture capitalist firm before by working for a hospital. So that was really cool. And then when you go out on your own and you look back, you're like, oh, I picked up that by doing that a little bit. I picked up that by doing that a little bit. So any experience that you're currently having is part of the whole picture that you're going to be utilizing in the future when you're making your break and doing your own thing.
Yeah. So I want to talk to you about that break. So we got the story and you went out on your own to consult. And part of that was driven by the values from your father and having the sovereignty and seeing how he lived his life. So that was a driving force of it. But I want to go to the period of time where you were making this decision. What happened? What was was there a moment, an epiphany that you said, I got to get out on my own? How long did you delay that? Yeah. I've got tons of questions about this.
Well, the first one was not voluntary.
Right.
So I didn't get to control the timing of it. And, but at that time I was like, well, I've been dreaming about this for a long time. Am I going to go look for a new job, or am I going to try this thing out? And so I put an LLC together, and I got my name out there a little bit. And just from my network that I had personally developed through doing lots and lots of change projects with the software technology company, I caught a break. And somebody called me and said, "Hey, we need you. Can you come in and do this?" And I'm like, "Yep, absolutely, absolutely." If there was one thing that I was aware of back then that I really, really encourage people to think about is to give first what you want to get. So I had a teacher that really, really encouraged me to tithe a little bit every single month. So I'd been doing that. I continue to do that. When I need help, getting my name out there, building an audience, promotion of myself. So I'm trying to help do that with anyone that I can help. When I need support, I try to help support others. So I always try to put that in my energy, makeup. What do I want to focus on is helping other people achieve what I also want to achieve. But if we do that together, then that's that win-win. So I focus a lot on that. So I think that you get what you give. That energy started to come back to me. I got some new opportunities. So I also believe very, very important, give other people opportunities, people that you may not think of, normally, give somebody a chance. If you want to get breaks yourself, give other people breaks. And that's how, again, you're going to get that, that energy flowing back to you. So, my consulting, 10 years, it's been 10 to 12 years now. I did really well. And every single organization I've worked with, we've made significant strides and really tangible results and improvements. And now with all that said, the big part that I forgot to mention is through that journey of 10 to 12 years, I've made a lot of mistakes about change that I had to learn, and they were painful. And, I had people screaming at me. I had, doctors throwing stuff at me. And so I started to pay attention to common pitfalls with change and common trends. And for whatever reason, every organization, you got the same project that you're doing. Every organization has a tendency to want to explore those same pitfalls. And I'm like begging them, don't go in that pitfall because I know what's going to happen, so don't do that. So, but what I had to learn is how I can push and when I have to let back. And when do they have to learn on their own? Because learning from a mistake is really powerful. They're going to remember that mistake forever and they're going to avoid that mistake forever. But then you can't always let somebody make a big mistake. You can't let a person go off the cliff. I always talk about how, managing a big change environment, big change project is a lot like parenting. You want to let your kid, have freedom of choice in many, many situations, but you can't let them do something that's going to be physically harmful, risk their security. And so those things apply to organizations too. So as the change leader, you have to be able to say, this is a rule that can't be broken, and here is why that rule can't be broken. But so many change leaders don't tell the why. They just say, do this because, and that doesn't settle with people's will of, freedom of choice. It doesn't appeal to their freedom of expression. So I had to learn how to balance those two things, freedom of expression with duty to the greater good, duty to the organization. And they can come into balance. And so my energy model talks a lot about that. It talks about power and governance and how those have to be balanced and kept in check for you to have a successful change effort. So I learned so many painful mistakes. And so in the past couple of years with COVID, I've had more time to really evaluate those trends and what are those energies and forces that help organizations move forward, what's missing, what's not there. There are a lot of change management methodologies out there today that weren't there 20 years ago when I started, but many of them are good, but some of them have holes in them. So mine is an energy engineering model, if you will, that works with change methodologies that are out there, that are the step-by-step. But mine is a thinking model and, getting your emotion model energies aligned before you take action. Because if you do that, if you do the energy work before a change project, then you can shorten it. You can be better, faster, cheaper, and get the results that you want without having all these headaches and painful mistakes that I made. Now, organizations are still going to make mistakes. That's part of our learning and part of growth, and it's actually required. But you shouldn't have to make mistakes that other people have made. They should be ones that are new or novel, so that you can keep moving forward.
So I'm wondering, because I think about what you just said related to trying not to make mistakes that other people have made. And I see a lot of what I think is a mistake, which is a lot of people dream about doing something different and wait a long time because they think there's some deficiency in their knowledge or skill set or whatever. So I want to take you back to your personal story about this involuntary change and how it maybe it was a blessing in disguise. Do you, how long were you thinking about wanting to be out on your own, and why didn't you do it sooner?
Oh, that's an awesome question. I honestly think I've been thinking about it since like high school because of my dad. Now, if I had worked for, or if I had grown up with a mom who was, in corporate or something, and maybe I wouldn't have had that same dream, but I had always been thinking about it.
And what prevented you from doing it? Because that's what I want people to. Yeah, that's what I want people to understand.
Because, why I didn't do it sooner. So I spent my last corporate gig was for 10 years. Why did I stay 10 years? Because number one, I was really good at it. I knew what I was doing, and I was in a state of certainty. And it absolutely was the best thing that happened to me. It was an involuntary change. But now I look back and I'm like, would I have had the strength at that time? Would I have had the foresight at that time? Because I had a family, a husband and 2 kids that I had to, it wasn't just MJ, I had to pay bills for 4 people, right? So that's a higher amount of reserve that I needed to have in place. So it was comfortable. And I think I would have made the change ultimately, but why I didn't make it sooner, I don't have an answer other than just comfort. But I completely 100% agree with you, is to just start somewhere, even if it's a side hustle or something. Get started, because the action part is what's going to lead you to the results. So you're not going to ever get there without, taking some action. So start practice before it's real. Before you have to make money and, be able to pay bills on that. Talk about it, share it with other people, talk about your dream. But again, within a circle of trust, you want to work with that within the people that support you, right?
That's good. I think that, my message, and the reason I ask a question like that is, I think your story is, you didn't hate your job.
No,
you liked it. You were good at it.
I loved it. I loved being,
But I think my point in asking it is, I think everyone, this is how I feel. Everyone, whether they love their job, tolerate their job, or hate their job, I think we should all be experimenting with things that bring out our creativity, that flex our skill set in new and novel ways, and at the very least, be thinking about how we can incorporate those in our job. But in the best of circumstances, it's building something that we have a stake in, care about, and could potentially free us from corporate shackles or from whatever we don't want in our lives, right? And it takes time. You can't live a daydream, do nothing, and then expect to be able to make that transition really quickly.
Yep.
So I think that's part of this whole, what we need to learn as a society can be done in a very low risk way by just carving out some time from our corporate life. And from my change came when I had 3 kids. I've had several breaks, but my biggest one, 3 kids and a corporate job and a house and cars and thinking about college and all this stuff, right? But I figured out a way to build a big, long runway and use my corporate job to fund and fuel my side hustle, which I eventually turned into a full-time thing and left. So I think, like, if we're not in a painful area where we hate our job, sometimes we're just comfortable. right? And we're not motivated to make that change, even though we're kind of dreaming about it.
Yeah.
And so I think I just encourage people to fight comfort and I think like challenging your assumptions and challenging your own thinking over and over again can kind of help get you there. It's like, where am I not actualizing? What are the things that I'm doing that are giving me energy? Well, let's figure out a way to just do those a little bit more.
Yeah.
Maybe not all full bore, maybe not full time, but just a little bit more. And you're going to learn something, and you're going to be, building your confidence and your belief flywheel. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of why I like to ask that question.
I want to add a little bit onto that.
Yeah, go ahead.
Please. Agree with you 100%, because just because you have a job, even if you have a job that you love and it's working great for you, it goes back to what we talked about at the top of the session is disruption is happening. Change is speeding up, and we don't know the impact of AI. We don't know the impact of climate change and different environmental models. And you've got to develop these skills. And I truly believe that change skills are creativity skills.
Yes.
If you can manage a project within your environment, your house, your current work, take from a current state to a future state. It's the same thing. You're going from certainty to uncertainty. Practice with that in a low risk way, because you're already sign up to do a project at your company, because then all of those skills are going to help you if you ever do make your break and go out to be an entrepreneur, because it's the same process. You're going from uncertainty to certainty. And I believe we're all going to have to repeat that over and over and over again. And that's where I encourage people, learn your change skills, because they're the same thing as your build skills. And change leaders are the builders of our future, and we can create it to be what we want it to be. But you got to have these skills, and it's kind of like weightlifting. You cannot lift a 10-pound weight if you can't lift a 5-pound weight. So start small and continue to move up, move up, move up. Start with something small, creativity project, and then do more the next time. All of those things will grow and expand because you're pouring more energy into it.
You're listening to the Break Podcast, powered by Career Cloud.
This episode is sponsored by ZipRecruiter. If you need a change and are looking for a new job, or if you're looking to hire for your small business, please check out ZipRecruiter today. Their smart technology matches the right candidates to the right jobs and sends new opportunities right to your inbox. They make finding a job or hiring the right person easier than ever. ZipRecruiter, the smarter way to hire. Try ZipRecruiter for free today by going to ZipRecruiter.com and tell them I sent you.
All right, I'm going to move on to our rapid fire questions and to close this out. So
awesome.
I ask everybody these questions. So so we can all learn together and make sure we're following the right people and reading the right books and all that kind of stuff. So is there a recent author, thought leader, or influencer that you've come across that has really caught your attention?
So I love that question. A couple years ago, I read Ray Dalio's book, Principles. And so I think that that's a powerful, powerful book. Yep. And now I'm reading. So awesome. That's awesome. I mean, if anybody's you're going to do any sort of business, you got to read that one. But now I'm reading Changing World Order.
I got that one too.
Do you? I haven't read it yet. It's a little bit more dry.
It's this one right here.
It's amazing though, because we're talking about change, and it doesn't matter if you think you're good or not, it's going to happen. And so he doesn't have a crystal ball, obviously, but he synthesizes the data and the history of the past 100 years and our economic models of the past 100 years to look at what's happening today and what might happen in the future. So I'm reading that. Love him. And I think that, he's got so much wisdom and experience from being the founder of Bridgewater. But there's a tendency I see in younger people to, not seek out the wisdom of people who have been around for a long time. So I just encourage people to look for both, so he's a good one who's been around a long time and knows what he's doing. Obviously he's a billionaire. So yeah. He's
a favorite of mine because he's an investor, and I've been studying investors for a really long time. He is very wise. He is very well thought out. He is very pragmatic and, deep research. And what's interesting about that book that you just mentioned is I think he looks back through like 2,000 years BC, like
I
in
know.
terms of how cycles work. And what we are experiencing today and what we will experience in the future is typically not brand new. Like we've seen dynasties and the Roman Empire and all these places like go through these same cycles. Now there might, history rhymes. So there's going to be a little bit of difference, but I think was the biggest takeaway from like reading that book is we've been here before, and there are things that we can learn and implement to try and make sure we don't go down this certain path. So I love that book. Yeah. Is there another book that you're reading or have read recently? Because I always ask about books too. So, and I know you're reading that one, but is there another one?
Yes. The Talent Code. This is not new. It's been out for a while. And I always talk about this because this was the biggest epiphany for me as a solopreneur is that on page 43, I literally wrote this down, 43, the struggle is not optional.
Yes.
He talks about how the brain works and that when we are joining two new things, so taking a new skill, developing a new habit, anything new, going from certain to uncertain or uncertain to certain, it's those brain neurons coming together. And the process that is produced there, he talks about, is the process of myelin, which is a substance in the brain that is in its early infancy of being investigated. But myelin produces a feeling of discomfort and a feeling of frustration. And, many people talk about getting out of your comfort zone. And, I do that, but I didn't do it for a long, long time. I resisted it because I thought that you just internalize like, oh, this is too hard. I must be doing something wrong. This doesn't feel good. I'm doing it wrong. But it's really, really, that's just how it works. So I encourage people, get out of your comfort zone and see how long you can sit with it. How long can you sit with that level of anxiety, that unease? And you don't have to, make it public or, bring other people into it, but just, sit with it. What does it feel like? Where is it in your body? Talk about it, write it down a little bit, but it's not you, it's just your brain. And so the struggle is not optional. To get those things to link, you've got to keep practicing. You just have to keep moving through it. And I only read that book like 3 or 4 years ago, but right before COVID. And it was just a huge aha moment for me that, doing something on your own is hard, but certainly doable. And the only thing is you will succeed as long as you don't quit, because once those neurons are put together through myelin, you have that forever. You have that neural pathway forever. You just have to keep running it. And so the more you practice, the more you focus on improvement, learn from your mistakes and keep growing, you'll get there.
Yeah, I think we get frustrated or shy away from challenge because we, as adults, we think we're adults. We should be able to just pick this stuff up immediately, but we're humans. Just like the smaller version of ourselves, our children, like we have to have patience with ourselves, right? Like when my kids are learning something new, I'm super patient with them, but I'm not patient with myself.
Yep.
We got to flip that because anytime we're learning something new, it just takes time and it's hard. So I love that. I'm going to check that book out.
Yeah.
All right. Do you have one piece of advice for someone that's just starting out in this world, trying to get a foothold? That, might be a college grad, or somebody just coming into their first job. What's your one piece of advice?
Well, I really, really, really believe in, you get what you give. So, you're in control of that. Identifying what do you need to nurture and grow within your life, whatever that might be, and then take initiative and do that thing first. Because by physicalizing that, you're attracting more and more and more of those energies. So I do goofy stuff. Like I try to be the first person to say hello on an airplane. I try to smile first, I just try to, bring, warmth and love back into my life. And so I initiate that. So, I think that to catch a break, you got to be willing to give other people breaks. So, where can you lift other people up, helping out in your community, helping, with, younger kids, where you can help other people catch a break, then those breaks and those opportunities will come to you as well. A second thing I would encourage people to do is write things down. Write your dreams down, write your your current thoughts down. I did a really bad job of organizing all of my content. I've got it all in different places. And it's really, really funny because I'll be on a thread that I'm like, oh my gosh, that's a great new epiphany that I had. And then I'll find somewhere where I literally wrote that down 15 minutes.
Yeah.
So your brain, it's all there. It's whether it's in the conscious or the subconscious. So write it down. If you have dreams, write it down, build on it, because it's a very powerful technique because you're taking it from an idea through your hand and you're energizing it, in your hand. Now, you may not be able to take action on that just yet, but that small little thing of putting it on writing and then reflecting on that in the future, that is a good way to start materializing your dream.
Excellent. So we've been talking about disruption and change. That's kind of scary. There's a lot of bad news and layoffs and stuff. So I want you to bring us a little levity. What is something that's got you really excited for the next, 12 months or so?
Yeah. Well, on a personal level, I'm writing my first book. So I'm super excited about that. It's called Engineering an Epiphany. So it's an energy engineering model about what I was talking about today. So that'll be out this summer. But then another thing that I'm super excited about with all of the talk about AI and ChatGPT, I personally don't know a lot about it, but I'd love to read more and study more about it. But just recently, there was an announcement that Microsoft and Epic, who is in Madison as well, they're teaming up to bring AI into the electronic medical record. And if there is one industry where I really think AI can make a huge possible transformation in people's lives, it's going to be in healthcare. If we can, analyze the trends of or the precursors of cancer before it even shows up on a scan. What are those, social determinants that can prevent diabetes, all of those kind of things. I think that's really, really cool and exciting. So I'm going to be watching that space.
Yeah, I like that one. And so for everybody listening, Epic is like the largest electronic medical record company in the country. They're in like every hospital, power basically every hospital, not everyone, but a lot of them. Mm-hmm. They happen to be based here in my hometown, and MJ's here as well. But yeah, I think that like idea of AI and machine learning and all this stuff in computers applied to healthcare hopefully brings us from the treatment model of medicine to, to more prevention. Yes. And I think that's sorely needed in that industry. So yeah, that's really interesting. Very cool. I'm excited about that as well. It'll be interesting to see what happens there. Mm-hmm. MJ, this has been great. I really appreciate you being here. Let people know where they can find you online, your company, any other socials, and we'll make sure we link to all of those in the resources.
Yeah, absolutely. So you can find me on my company website is summerlandeducation.com. And I have lots of free videos out there. I've got a free video series on my change model that I'm writing my book about. I also have a paid for course if you want to start developing your change skills. And I'm going to be continuing in this space and helping people because I'm deeply, deeply passionate about building change leaders in all industries and all businesses, because the change leaders are the builders of the future, and we can determine and get the world where we want it to be. And I believe that people need these skills in all companies. So I'm very passionate about helping to build the skills of our change leaders.
Excellent. And what about any socials? Are you on LinkedIn? Are you on Twitter?
I'm on LinkedIn. Yeah, I'm on LinkedIn is my main networking platform that I use. So just MJ Reiners, no periods. But you can find me there.
Perfect. We'll make sure we link all that out. MJ, thanks so much for sharing your knowledge and your expertise with us. This was a great conversation. I appreciate it.
This is a lot of fun, Mike. You do great work. So thank you so much. I appreciate it. And hello to everybody in your audience.